The press will be listening. We anticipate, a lot of people. I want you to be able to speak freely, but always, I think anything that you say, because you probably have seen where I said I would be shocked if we go back to school as normal in August, and they left out the as normal part. And so that's down buried in the story. So we just be careful what you say. I'll give the charge. I really want you today to work on these are recommendations. These are recommendations to me and to the governor on how we will spend our CARES Act funding, how we'll get school started back. Our staff, Dr. Payne's on, Dr. Mathis, I see Katie Milgis is on, Laurie Treyrick, Ryan Brown is on, and we will be calling. This is a very small group. I had hundreds of people who wanted to be on this group, but I tried to pick a very small group that will serve as the core. We will be, there's some advisory groups that will be calling in with their special expertise and some additional stakeholder people. So, and you're welcome to nominate folks to me for that, but we've got some folks. Main thing is this is a working group, and to get work done, you can't get too big. You gotta keep it controlled. So thank you all for serving. And I see Dr. Moore, our staff. Who else's staff? I thought I saw Akil Ross pop up. Akil, hey Akil, thank you for joining us. Akil is actually he's going to be an ex officio a member of this group because he is on Accelerate SC as the education person. So I thought it was really important for him to hear what we're talking about so that he can relay those messages to the committee as he is part of that. Here's Nancy Williams, our finance director. Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Molly, it's 10 o'clock. I need to make this go live, so just heads up. All right, you all are live on the website and ready to get started whenever you are.
Okay, our time is showing 9:59 a.m. I'm going to wait till that clicks till 10 o'clock to get started.
I'm unmuted now.
Harrison. Good morning, Harrison. Well, good morning, Ryan. Are you ready for us to go live?
Good morning.
Yes, ma'am, whenever you are.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Molly Spearman, honored to serve as State Superintendent of Education, and I want to welcome everyone to this first meeting, the core group of our course on Education Accelerate Ed, and I appreciate everyone serving. This is a small group intentionally because this is a working group, and we have a lot of work to do. I'm asking this group to give recommendations on several things. First of all, how do we operate much needed extra instructional time for our students in South Carolina? And our first task will be to look at our summer reading program, which we run by statute for our struggling readers in third grade. Internally, we've been meeting as a staff. Dr. David Mathis. David, if you want to wave to everybody. Chairs or is the deputy who represents the early learning office here at the department, and we already have some ideas that we want to run by you as to what we would like to propose an expanded summer reading camp, reading math camp, and hopefully include more than just third graders. So you'll be hearing from him in just a minute. And then also, I'd like for you all to look at our operations over the summer, any recommendations that you might have or think that would be top priority for special groups of students who might need extra instructional time. And then obviously recommendations for how do we go back to school in August. I know that we're looking into a crystal ball and that's difficult. None of us know what the virus will be doing in August, and we'll have to monitor and adjust. So I think we have to have different models. Our first model obviously would be to go back to school like normal, run classes, class sizes as normal, adding, I'm sure, extra health precautions. But if the virus is still raging and we have to take additional precaution, we need a plan B and maybe a plan C. So that's what I'd like to hear from you. I'm going to take just a minute to welcome the members of the committee. And if you'll just wave when I call your name, Tanya Addison, who is the principal for us down in Florence 4 at Timmonsville High School, Timmonsville Middle School. Missy Campbell. Missy is a well-respected finance director serving in Spartanburg 7 and has tremendous knowledge in finance. Dr. Latoya Dixon, who is now up in York, serving as instructional secondary director, but was here at the department with us and is very, very familiar with our rural schools and our schools that need extra support. Sherry East, who's president of the South Carolina Education Association and a teacher. Sherry Eppelheimer, who is principal of our largest high school in the state, Wando High School down in Charleston. Dr. Harrison Goodwin, superintendent in Chesterfield, who has the distinction of serving as the president of the Superintendent's Division of SCAS of the South Carolina Association of School Administrators. And Harrison is representing me on the Southern Region Educational Board, who is doing the same thing with the Southern states, looking at recommendations. So it's really important for him to be able to share with us what he's hearing and what we're doing here. Also, Shonda Jefferson, who is our state teacher of the year, an experienced teacher. Shonda also is representing me on that SREB board. So I'm anxious to hear from both of them, any ideas that they've heard. Patrick Kelly, another outstanding teacher who is representing the Palmetto State Teachers Association. And Patrick has done work not only here in South Carolina, but served as an internship at the U.S. Department of Education. So brings a lot of knowledge and contacts with folks from across the nation. Brian Newsome, who is the principal at Gray Collegiate Academy, one of our fine charter schools, and also serves on the Education Oversight Committee. Chuck Sailors, who is a school board member of our largest district in the state, Greenville County, and served as president of the School Boards Association, and also was the first gentleman to ever serve as the national president of the PTA of America. So representing parents as well as school board members. Scott Turner, who was a retired superintendent from Spartanburg, but quickly was re-employed and serves in Greenville County, our largest school district, and also serves on the Education Oversight Committee. So thank you, Scott. And Alan Walters, who's a member of the State Board of Education. And Alan brings a wealth of background in safety, law enforcement, works with the Georgetown County School District. There are several folks that you see on the screen who are staff members. I need to introduce Akil Ross, our former National Principal of the Year, who's serving on Accelerate SC. Let's see, Dr. Sabrina Moore, who works here at the department with Student Services. David Mathis, I've already introduced Dr. Mathis. Katie Milches, who is our Governmental Affairs Director here at the department. John Payne, who represents our federal program, Special Education Services, a deputy. Nancy Williams, who is our Finance Director here at the department. And Ryan Brown and Laurie Treywick are on the screen. Now, there are a number of other staff members who are listening in today, and there are other folks that we will be adding as advisors to this group. So we're going to be calling on lots of people for additional support, but this is, as I said, our core meeting getting started today. And I'm very thankful that my friend and neighbor, actually, from Saluda County, Dr. Kathy Coleman. Kathy is a school board member. She is also a grandparent with a young child in four-year-old program and a former president of the South Carolina School Boards Association and works for Clemson University. So a lot of experience. And I see Angel Malone's on the screen and can be heard. Angel is the director of career and technology programs here at the department. So Kathy, I'm about to turn it over to you. I think I've given the charge. We've got 2 hours. We're going to be very mindful of your time today. We would like to focus on the things I mentioned earlier. How is the best way to operate additional instructional days? I'm so proud of the work that teachers, principals, school communities have done across the state on a turnaround, on a dime. They monitored, they adjusted, and they came through with flying colors. The best we could do to deliver instruction to our students and also deliver meals to our students across the state. It's gone very, very well. But it is no secret that the best way for children to learn is in a classroom, face-to-face with a teacher. And our students have lost about 30% of that time this year of the 180 days. So we got some making up to do. Some children have been able to really get some high quality instruction, others not as much. And we know we're going to have some makeup time. We know we're going to have to really go back and look at our standards and those foundational standards and do some reteaching, do some really good assessing of students. So that's what I need your recommendations on how best to make that happen. So I'll turn it over to you, Kathy.
Thank you, Superintendent Spearman, for establishing this task force. And I'm grateful to each one of you for your willingness to serve, and I'm certainly very honored to serve. I look forward to working with each of you and our advisory groups, staff, and other educational professionals to develop these recommendations. So we've got a big challenge ahead of us, and what I want to do is just go ahead and jump right in and get started. First of all, I guess a little bit of housekeeping. If you want to ask a question or to make a comment, because I'm going to be asking you questions. I think we can see everybody, or if you're not on video, if you just send a chat, then I'll call on you, so that way we don't have everybody talking at one time. Is that good with everyone?
And just make sure, I know folks are used to different models. The chat is those circles at the bottom of your screen, the one with the quotation mark is the chat room. You can raise your hand in the one with the little person on it, but if you're not sure how to operate that, just wave at us and we'll call on you.
All right, so to get started, I think you have an agenda. Next thing on the agenda is our committee assignments. And I think the value of that is to take your best talents, put them to use, focus on some broad areas, and then have you work together and work with our folks on the advisory groups and our professionals that can really give us some good input. So kind of three broad categories that I thought would be good in considering your positions and what you bring to the table, and areas where I think we need to, really to operate this summer and into the fall. So those three areas are building and student services, instruction, and then operations and administration. And so I want us to talk about sort of what could go into those groups. First of all, buildings and student services, and that subcommittee, and I'm going to read your name, and I'd like for you to serve. Alan Walters, Chuck Sailors, Harrison Goodwin, and Shonda Jefferson. And then in instruction, Latoya Dixon, Tanya Addison, Patrick Kelly, and Sherry East. And then on the operations administration side, Scott Turner, Brian Newsom, Missy Campbell, and Sherry Epplesheimer. And so I'll just kind of start with my thoughts, and then I want you to give me some input as to things we need to to address or include.
So we'll send that list out
Yeah.
to you.
So under, buildings and student services, that to me should include all of our safety and health considerations, our student services that we normally would consider, and our special student services. And this, I think we could be sure we address our social emotional needs of our students, how we are going to, if we need to do social distancing, how we will configure our buildings, et cetera. And we can add as to what we want this group to address. Instruction, of course, will be 4K through 12. Every aspect, as Superintendent Spearman talked about, our standards, what we will need to address, how our classroom learning will look like. And then on operations administration, that's going to be transportation, food services, facilities, finance, how we run our schools, how they will operate. And so those are sort of some broad categories that I think we should kind of start with. And then I want to get your ideas of, maybe drilling down on some of those. And then I want you to work on those beyond this, when we start getting into the specifics. And so looking at those kind of groups, and then I want to address, sort of to start with overall, sort of 10,000 foot level, these areas that Superintendent Spearman asked us to look at, really the summer reading program, summer math, how we can address that, the other operations we can address, hopefully over the summer, and then how we go back.
And if I may say, Kathy, I think too, because I know we have a number of folks from across the street in the State House listening in today, and Katie Milches is our governmental relations director. So I think once we get all of our recommendations together, obviously there may be some statutory needs and things that we would have to go to that group financially as well. So that type of report would be then she will take that work and work with the legislative staffers and General Assembly members as to how we would move forward.
I think we'll definitely have to consider our legislative and policy recommendations.
Absolutely.
So, thank you, Katie, for being on here. And we look forward to working with our elected officials to do the best we can for our students. So that's where I wanted to start. And if you want to send in a message or a chat on other things we need to add, I think Brian and Laurie are taking some good notes for us. And I'd like to, if you have some comments, those broad categories of how we can start. Can everybody hear me okay? Everybody good?
Sherry, can you
Okay.
hear? I see where you put a note that you're hearing better now. Let us know. You want to unmute and tell us how it's going, Sherry?
Okay.
Okay.
Good. All right, great. Anybody have any comments off the bat about sort of those 3 and then 4 working areas? We can, if you would, it'd probably better if you can email or send in some chats as to things we need to add, but I tried to keep it broad, but then cover all those areas that we are going to make, have to make some recommendations. Everybody good? Comments? All right, thank y'all. Agreeable group here. Please, we want your input. So next on the agenda is and we'll get started. We'll just go ahead and get started in our summer learning discussion. And I'm going to ask Dr. Mathis if he would talk to us about some ideas that we're all for that you've been working on to help us think through our first and foremost issue is going to be this, what we can accomplish this summer.
Spearman, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure. our division, College and Career Readiness, have been working the past couple of weeks on the possibilities of a summer program and operating sort of along the ideas of, as Superintendent Spearman said earlier, summer reading camp. We have put together a framework that would focus on current kindergarten through third grade students, and focus on ELA, literacy, and math. There's a lot of research out there that talks about students, the need to be on grade level by the end of third grade, and the difficulty that students incur after that point if they're not on grade level. So considering the time, as Superintendent Spearman said, 30% of a face-to-face loss this year, when we're able to come back face-to-face, we have put together a program of a face-to-face summer program and a virtual option. So, and we want, I use the word robust, because at this point, we want to focus as much as we can on the skill sets where students need extra help in ELA and math. Prior to the school closure, most school districts had identified students who were showing difficulty in ELA and had identified them more than likely to receive support during the summer reading camp. So using that pool of students and expanding that for any student, kindergarten through third grade, who may be showing difficulty in ELA and math, and that could be by looking at former state tests. It could be looking at any district benchmark assessments, the screeners that we give, and of course, teacher recommendations. To identify students, each district to identify students that would need to, who would benefit from summer instruction before the school year starts. So identifying kindergarten through third grade students who are at risk for reading and math difficulty. We're recommending a minimum of a 4-week program where we focus on ELA and math. And we know there needs to be some flexibility with the time, but 90 to 120 minutes of ELA instruction and 50 minutes of math. And it could be a situation where districts could operate a morning session, an afternoon session for that. If we're able to meet face-to-face, of course, providing transportation, providing a meal service with that, we would we would want our districts, our students to take a pre-assessment as they enter the program. And at some point, some post-assessment to determine what level of growth has occurred and what we were able to accomplish during that program. So here is a situation we can't do everything, but what we do, we want to matter most. So when done well, we drill down and focus on students who need significant help or showing reading difficulties and math difficulties, and we offer the support that they would need face-to-face or through a virtual program. And that would be some flexibility with districts of how best they could operate that. But then these students are students we would identify that we would continue on in the fall. We've identified that they will need interventions in the fall. And so providing opportunities to target the specific skills that they need. One thing that will be published in July are learning progressions. And those are taking our standards in ELA and math and bundling those together and determining where a student is, regardless of where he ended up this school year. But as we look at summer and as we start the current or the new school year, where are they on those learning progressions? And then what's the next level of instruction that would need to occur? That's a lot of collaboration with teachers that would take place, some very rich discussions. So we know exactly where the students are and we have a plan for where they would need to move in that next level of instruction. And so the identified students for the summer, carrying that over into the fall, and there'll be more students in the fall that we would identify that we would need significant help as if they're showing difficulty for reading and math. But it's what I call that double down, and making sure that we focus on the skill sets of where they are and how we build on those. And of course, our goal is by the end of third grade, those students to be on grade level. So this is, I think we look at this as we want to recover, academically recover from the time that we may have lost and the difficulties that we may have faced, but providing a measure here to help make that happen. So that's just the framework, and I'll stop there in case you may have any questions.
Hey, David, this is Shonda. I like the idea that you're talking about or addressing the student sliding and everything like that, but is there measures in place to make sure that we access or have access to professionals that can help with the social and emotional needs of those students? Because the students have been at home for a long time, and most of our most vulnerable students, especially those from economically disadvantaged places, they have gone through trauma. It's been traumatic for them to be away from school. So not only are we not only addressing, I know we're not only addressing the academics, but making sure that we have something in place to address their social emotional needs as well.
Exactly, and I think that's extremely important as students come back with us face to face. Even before that, what we can put in place in the social emotional needs, and that Dr. Coleman and I had conversations earlier, and that's why I think that is highlighted in some of the committee work. But I think you're exactly right. That's an area sometimes that we need extra help and support in, as far as from other professionals that could give us some good guidance with that. For me, I believe social emotional needs need to be met so that the academic needs can be met. They can't be done separately or from each other. So I see a couple of comments here about the transportation and the cleaning protocols, and I think that all will come out of this committee work. But to answer your question, Chandra, those two I think have to go hand in hand.
I would say that exactly, and we talked about that, Shauna. That's why I really want you to serve on that student services committee. I appreciate that. Okay.
Mathis, may I ask a question?
Sure.
Can you distinguish what you just described from our normal summer reading camps, which we're already preparing for? Are you talking about modifying what we're already planning, or are you talking about being extra on top of what we're already planning?
So for the summer reading camp, we talked to instructional leaders yesterday that they could offer something probably in the month of June remotely, but this would really, I think from what I see, this would really take the place of, and those normally happen in June, but this would really take the place of what would have happened in June. So this is a different focus for ELA and math. So yes, it would be a different focus.
And at some point, I want to address the funding mechanism that you're considering too. I want to get to a couple of the other comments here. Latoya, you want to make a comment? Need to unmute.
A couple of comments. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you now.
Okay, good. First, I'd like to say that when we talk about making up things with our students based on what they've missed, we need to be very careful in how we use that language. We're not making up time, we're making up learning. And so I worry, it concerns me that we are are driven by the time that would have been spent, and we need to be driven by the learning that should have taken place. So I think we need to talk about how we make up the learning that students need to move on to the next grade or the next set of skills. I think that in terms of, I'm having a really difficult time. Some of you know I've served as an elementary school principal. I served as an English teacher at the middle school level, and I've been a middle school principal. I'm having a really difficult time with virtual reading instruction for young children. I think even if children have access to broadband and to devices, it still requires a supportive adult and a level of expertise in teaching reading that would be very difficult to mirror virtually. So I think we need to acknowledge that there are some things that simply can't be replicated virtually, and think about it that way. Third, I think we need to have some clearly defined criteria if we were going to expand camp opportunity to students in grades K through 3 in the areas of language arts and mathematics. We're going to have some clearly defined criteria. When we are fulfilling the Read to Succeed law, that's very clear. The law makes it very clear who's required to attend summer reading camp. But when we expand that, that makes things slightly different. All of our students have been away from school since March 16th or have been learning remotely. Imagine families like my sister's family. She has a kindergartner, a 4th grader, a 6th grader, and a 7th grader. And I can imagine that we would get questions from parents with multiple children as to why can't my 5th grader attend, but my 1st and grader and kindergartner can. And so by having a set of clearly defined criteria, that would help us do that. But I want to be sure that we are thinking about the skills and processes that we need to target rather than the time. Because 4 weeks of poor instruction without learning won't work. It's what's happening when we're with the children rather than how much time we spend with them. And I do, again, want to emphasize my concerns about the early childhood piece and teaching reading to young children remotely. I have some concerns about that.
Thank you. Thank you, LaToya. I agree with you. We've talked about a lot of those same points, and I think that's a critical point that Dr. Mathis made. It is going to be about the learning. I know we have several questions over here about a funding model. So, Dr. Mathis, do you want to address that, or Superintendent Spearman, on what you're thinking about on a possible funding model for this?
Well, David, I can talk, please fill in if I leave out anything. Statewide, for the traditional summer reading camp that would be held under a Read to Succeed, we get about $8 million. Is that right, Nancy? Nancy Williams, shake your head, yes? Correct. Yeah, approximately $8 million. There are around 14,000 students that are generally identified. Probably about half of those attend the camp. Is that about right, David, for a year? Or in that ballpark? So we do already have that state funding that will be going out to districts. This is something that the CARES Act funding, we sent in our application yesterday. I anticipate we'll hear something back within 1 to 3 days, is what U.S. Department of Education told us. That's $216 million. 90% of that funding goes directly to districts. They have a pot of 12 different areas that they can spend it on. Very broad, from cleaning schools to additional instructional days to buying technology equipment. It's very, very broad. We are doing a survey that's due in this morning from districts as to how they're thinking about spending their money, particularly around technology, and that is a top priority for about half of our districts in the state, to use a major chunk of their proportion to buy new technology to give professional development to teachers and to be better prepared. The instructional days, districts may choose to do that as well. I will tell you, it's very expensive. And the department gets 10% of the funding. We're hoping to use some of our funding to support a learning management system, because there are about half of our do not have a learning management system that would greatly improve online learning. So we're planning to purchase that and those licensures for the state with some of our funding, do some professional development, support early learning. We can add some of our money to the pot. But then the state, on top of that, the governor will receive 1.9 billion that comes to the state. And that's what Accelerate SC is. One of the things they're looking at. In fact, I have to go over there this afternoon at 1 o'clock to begin talking with them about the major asks that we might have. Instructional days could be one of those. So additional funding, and we've estimated, Dr. Mathis has looked at this, to do what he's talking about, Dr. Turner, on top of what you're already doing, adding extra students, adding the math learning would be we estimate somewhere between 35 to possibly $50 million to really do this. It is reimbursable, which means the state, the districts, along with us, we would have to go ahead and pay for it. And then the funding would come in as a reimbursement to the districts for running these extra instructional days. So the extra, and we'll talk about this later, but the extra instructional days for regular school, if you brought in, say, all of your K-8 students, all K-8 students for a day, cost right at $30 million per day for teacher salaries, fringe, the aides, the folks, the transportation. Statewide is about $30 million a day. So you figure if you want to do 5 days of all K-8 coming in, $150 million roughly. So it's very expensive, but it certainly falls under the categories that can be funded through the CARES Act money. I hope that helped.
Yeah,
Everybody I know is Sherry.
right, and I want to call on them too. Sherry's made several comments, and those are kind of the things I think we want to. Can y'all hear me? Okay, all right. So, Sherry, right, that usually the students that are struggling are the ones without access to parental support, virtual support. Agreed, those are some things we talked about. Trying to see where else in the chat's kind of moved down here. Can y'all hear? You can still hear me? Looks like. Can you see me? Okay, I don't know. We got a message in our.
They're showing us that we're not seeing video. Y'all can see us, okay?
That's why.
No, they can't see us.
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear us?
As long as you can hear us, okay,
keep
I'll
talking.
keep talking then, because, I can see some of the chats here, which is why we're gonna drill down, to address a lot of what you're saying. Subcommittees. I'm gonna call on Patrick and then Sherry. Patrick, can you unmute? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. In terms of summer plans, I think having experienced distance learning as a teacher over the last month and a half, there's two big challenges that we got to think of, especially if we're going to be looking at this virtually to start out with. Number one, we've already kind of nibbled around the edges, is accessibility. I mean, there's too many kids in this state that cannot currently access virtual programs. So I agree completely with the concerns about about early childhood reading education that Ms. Dixon shared being virtual. I think it's limited, but even if it's limited, it's worthless if you can't access it. So we've got some technical aspects we got to get around, and I think we've got to address access needs for special populations, especially for special education students and our English language learners, because I worry the most about those two groups during a distance learning environment, because it's so hard to meet the unique needs of those groups through a distance learning environment. I think the other thing, if we're going to do this virtually to start out with, that we have got to figure out is, how do you engage kids? Like, we're having trouble getting kids that do have access. Once we get past the access problem, I'm teaching 29 advanced placement seniors right now, all of whom have devices, all of whom have Wi-Fi, and I can't get 100% of them to participate in any single day. Not because they don't care, not because they're not interested, but because they're working an extra 30 hours a week at Pizza Hut to supplement what their family has lost, or because they're caring for a sibling during the day. I have one who's babysitting the neighbor's siblings or kids every day because the neighbor is a nurse. So we've got to figure out, how do we make this engaging to kids? Because if we build the best platform in the world, but only 40-50% of our kids can participate, I guess 40-50% is better than none, but the goal should be 100% of kids. And we got to figure out how to do that in a way that's going to hook kids and get them engaged in something that is not mandatory in terms of, we can't like compulsory attend them like we can with the ordinary school day. And we can't rely on parents having to hover on the back end when parents are struggling just to keep things going within their household.
Thank you, Patrick. Great comments.
While you're getting ready to call the next, I will say, Patrick, and I know I saw a lot of heads nodding as far as technology. We do have an internal group working here at the department with some stakeholders on improving technology access. We're working, and I know that Accelerate SC, this is a big issue that they are discussing, the broadband capabilities in South Carolina. But you are so right. I've heard many teachers talk about the engagement of students. So that's where we're going to need the teachers in this group really, and principals, really good advice on and creative thinking on engaging students.
Sherry East.
You need to unmute, Sherry. Hang on.
You need to unmute.
Sherry, hang on. There we go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, hi everyone. I think ditto on Latoya and Patrick. I think what concerns me the most is, are we wasting money on a virtual literacy math program? And is that the best use of our dollars if we know, for one, even Patrick's high flyer kids aren't tuning into it? I think our struggling folks are the ones that aren't going to have transportation. They don't have the Wi-Fi. They don't have the parental support. And they're the most vulnerable group of people we have to try to fix or work with this learning gap that they've had while we've been on COVID. Plus, just they had a gap before, and they're going to continue to have the gap when we get back. But I like the plan A and plan B. I think the best would be face to face, but what does that look like? And I think what I've been hearing from everybody is, what does it look like for summer programs, but what does that look like into the fall? And can we ensure these strugglers, how many of the ones that we normally have in summer camps are the bus riders? Like, how many of those are dependent on the bus to come and get them, to take them to summer camp? And what does that look like if we go with plan B, a face-to-face, which I think we all agree is the best way to teach reading? And how do we distance that? How do we have the cleaning protocols? How do we have the equipment? And do we do a June situation, or do we do it right before school starts in July and push it out a little bit? So we're kind of a test model for what the big picture is going to look like in August. So that would be my summer comments. Is you also have high schools. I know we're worried about the little ones, but we normally do content and credit recovery. It's usually virtual. Those kids who have tuned out on COVID, they're going to need some, possibly taking some classes over at that point too. Are we going to open up summer school for anything other than the elementary level?
Thank you, Sherry. Those are all good comments. And I think David may have talked about it, may have not. I think the proposal, or you're looking at it, is July for coming and doing a classroom setting, right, with your and David, maybe you can address a couple of those items that Sherry was talking about.
Sure. The plan that we've worked on is a face-to-face when so it's not all virtual. It would just be a virtual option if that's needed. We totally understand that our earliest learners benefit when they're with their teacher, and so that this plan is built around that. But if we need to be creative and we're not able to come back, what can we offer our students that could be a virtual option if we can't be there face to face? The other is, I think it's key that as we move into this would segue into the new year, especially if we're able to add days at the beginning of the year, so that the summer program and the summer learning would segue right into where students are for the opening of the new school year, especially if we're able to add days onto the beginning of the year. So, but I want to clear up the confusion. I don't want people to think this is a virtual program. We have built this, or our suggestions have been built around bringing our earliest learners in face-to-face in small groups where needed with teachers.
Tanya, you have a comment for us, Tanya Addison?
Hi, everyone. I just had a quick comment or a question for David. Maybe we could give some consideration to just determining what our goal is and provide districts with some guidance as it relates to filling the learning gaps for students. Program. Maybe we can ask districts to come up with their model. It may include a summer model, but some districts may elect to come up with an innovative model throughout the school year to address the needs. And the reason I say that is because our challenges across the district vary. Some districts have more access to the internet than other districts. Some districts may be affected by COVID-19 more so than others. So we all have different challenges, and each district knows their challenges better than anyone else. So I think just coming up with an overall guidance for districts and allowing them the flexibility to come up with their models would be beneficial if that's permitted.
That's a great reminder, Tanya. Thank you. Have you already been thinking about what you want to do down in the Timminsville area?
Well, right now, our conversations are centered around what are our challenges. We're looking at what are our challenges and what are our concerns. And really, at this point, we have to meet those needs first. We do have remote locations within our service area where our students do not have access to the internet because it's not offered. Some households live too far away from the road. We do have devices that we issue to our population, but based on the amount of bandwidth that they have within their household, virtual learning may not be accessible. And it definitely may not be accessible for students who have for households who have multiple students within a household. And especially if you have a parent who's also trying to do remote work from home, families would have to extend their bandwidth, and that has been a challenge within our service area. So really just brainstorming how we can meet the needs is where we are.
I agree. I think that the bandwidth is a problem in a lot of places for a lot of families. And Akil, I'm glad you're on here. And can share that concern with Accelerate SC with the committee. I appreciate that. I did want to see Harrison. Can you tell us about your plans? Thank you, Tanya. I appreciate your comments. Thought about your working on your summer plans?
Yeah, our summer plans. Obviously, our full face-to-face we've planned for July. We are planning to go as far as we can financially, not just in grades 1 through 3, but all the way into the upper elementary grades. Of course, focusing on ELA and math. And you know, we are very fortunate that we've been able to always provide a robust transportation program, and so I'm not worried about that. You know, the access as far as broadband is a real issue for us. 35% of our homes do not have access. So, you know, the summer part in June is going to be problematic, but we are trying to find some possible workaround solutions there.
So, are you planning something for June? You say that, are you looking at doing?
Yes, we're planning to do a virtual type setting in June for our most struggling folks. Yes, so we are planning a June and a July program.
Okay. And I wondered, man, if I may ask Scott Turner, Greenville, what are y'all planning in one of the larger districts?
Right now, our plan is for the traditional summer camps to be in July. So if you were to add an additional 4 weeks, I'll go back to Tanya's comment. We would like some flexibility in a plan, perhaps to extend it into the school year where you have an extended day for some students where you could provide those opportunities.
That's a good point.
Scott, if I could also jump on back of that before I sign back off is, I think it's going to be real important that we hold the hands of our K through 3rd graders all the way through at least first semester. And that would include those extended day plans. I don't think any few weeks in the summer is going to get us back to where we need to be. And if we lose this generation, if we don't do what we need to do K through 3, we could lose this generation of students, that package. We absolutely cannot ignore that moving forward.
That's a great reminder, Harrison, and I think you're right. And I know folks have asked me, when I talked about K8, K5, really everybody has got tremendous needs, but that foundational group of K through 3, we have to put as a top priority. I agree with you on that for additional days. It looks like several people in comments were talking about the fact that you believe that the closer we can do any of extra days, the closer we can do that to the start of school in August to run some program in July is a good idea. I saw where I think Patrick said, otherwise you still got that summer slide worry. And I see Sherry shaking her head yes, and she hadn't made a comment yet. Sherry, do you want to chime in? Go ahead.
I agree with Patrick. I think the closer you can do it to the start of school, create like a continuity, kind of a seamless transition into what we hope to be a semi-normal opening for the school year. But again, anytime you have that lapse, and I'm just a true believer, anytime you have that lapse in learning, it's going to create more problems. And we're no different than any other schools across South Carolina and the nation. We've got kids that are, we've got those achievement gaps, and just got to find a way to reach this group of kids this year and, push them on. So I agree wholeheartedly with as soon as we can.
Someone mentioned earlier about credit recovery. I think maybe Sherry, it was you who said something about that. And that too, there's additional funding grant that South Carolina, we qualify. We're not in the top priority. We're in the second priority group of states. And one of the things that the main focus on that is additional instructional time delivered virtually. And I know high school kids many high school kids have trouble virtual as well, but offering more credit recovery, additional courses over the summer, that is something that we hope to apply for in a separate grant that we could fund more through more high school courses and possibly even some middle school and elementary courses virtually, but a real focus on that high school credit recovery and any additional courses they may need through this grant. Whether it'll be funded or not, I'm not sure that we'll be on that level, but there is a possibility there also.
Yeah, we got I'm trying to get to everybody that has a comment. Latoya. Unmute here. There we go.
Sorry about that. I would just like to share a couple of ideas. I've been thinking about this a lot. And in our district, we have a similar situation. We have probably about 30% of our students who live in an area where broadband access is not provided. We have a learning management system. So we're doing sort of a blended approach. But I'm wondering if of Superintendent Spearman, when I hear you talk about an LMS, I definitely think that's on the right path. But I think there are 4 things we could do that would be really helpful in helping to recover learning for all of our students who have been learning from a distance at this time. The first one is making sure that districts have access to an LMS, whether that be statewide or districts like ours that already have Canvas being reimbursed for the LMS they have present. The second one is, what if the state or even the governor used some of his funding to provide high quality instructional aligned content that is focused on those essential standards and skills by courses for students that could be pushed into our LMS. Now, there's some technical pieces around that. That content would have to meet something called common cartridge format so that it could be pushed into Google Classroom or Canvas or Blackboard, whatever LMS you might use. But that would meet the needs of all of our districts. That would allow districts that don't have the district level capacity to build that instructional content for their teachers to have access to something. And those that do have capacity could pull those pieces and customize those units for their students. And I think it would relieve teachers in that it would make them the diagnostician. What I find right now is that teachers are very burdened with creating content. They're creating lots of instructional content. And I want to be clear that I'm certainly not suggesting that computers teach our students. What I'm suggesting is that we provide a resource that can be accessed both virtually and in a paper pencil format. So if we think about some of those new innovative options that are out there for instructional content, that would involve the potential of working with a particular content provider to make sure they provide something that's aligned to our state standards and that is high quality into the courses. But if we had those essential skills and that content, then we could piece together and align that to our district curriculum maps. For those of us who don't have instructional specialists, that relieves us of that burden in our district. And then teachers can use pieces of that as they wish, and some might decide to use that whole hog. So I think it's about 4 things: a learning management system, some instructional content that all students have access to that can be provided either virtually or paper pencil, and a focus on helping teachers be the diagnostician. I think the most effective teachers don't know everything, but they certainly know what students don't know. They're able to identify that students can't round because they don't have hold of place value. And so they're able to target that essential learning around place value so that students then are able to round and master the skill of rounding. I'm using a very simplified example. And the last thing is some professional development support that allows teachers to really hone their skills around how do you instruct in a distant or remote learning environment. That looks completely different than what you do in the face-to-face classroom. And it requires a lot of feedback to students, and not just in the form of grades. I've heard from some high school students who are having some difficulty being motivated because they are very driven by grades. They're very, very driven by grades, and we want students to be driven by learning. So those are 4 thoughts I have. If the state were to provide a learning management system, some learning instructional content that districts could then use to either customize and build their own units, we could level the playing field. Right now, if you think about it across our state, I don't know how many 5th grade teachers we got, but they're all building content probably around the same stuff. And we probably have thousands of versions on units in force and motion. We could have one version that we knew was rigorous enough, aligned to our standards, and that teachers can then work through, focus their time and effort on student understanding rather than building content. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, LaToya. And I think professional development certainly got to be a part of this recommendations from this task force.
Yeah, and those are great recommendations. Yeah. And honestly, we have thought about using of the $216 million, the Department of Education administrative cost, and we keep 10% to use in statewide efforts. So we are looking at the LMS system. I think that development of content is an excellent idea, and professional development as well. So I hear you. Great comment.
One last point, Superintendent Spearman. I want to be sure we don't confuse more days with more depth.
Say that again?
I want to be sure we don't confuse adding more days with more depth. I think all of our students have been learning remotely. And so to me, it's not simply about having more time, but it's what's going to be happening in that time. And by having instructional content that's available to all of our districts across the state, we've been talking about starting our summer reading camp in July and running it in a traditional format. But my superintendent and I also had some conversation about what if we were able to start school, because all of our students are going to have some learning gaps, even our most high-flying, high-performing kids. We need to be able to diagnose where those gaps are and then target those. So if the department provides some instructional content, those learning progressions that are going to help us identify the prerequisite skills and processes that are necessary for the next sequence of learning, then we put our teachers into place to not have to be so focused on developing content. That takes a lot of work, and teachers are working really hard on that. And we give them some support around that. So I just want to be clear. I want to keep saying we want to make sure that more time doesn't always mean more depth of knowledge. And it's what's happening during that time that is critically important. We want to make sure that we focus on that.
I'm gonna try to, I'm gonna call on Patrick and then I'm gonna call on Tanya. Go ahead, Patrick.
I think I forgot to put my hand back down, but if I'm unmuted, I'll just go ahead and say,
You've been doing really good on your comments over here.
I just want to emphasize the last comment about professional development. It's got to be led by people that have experienced it in this moment. There's too much PD that is going around right now on distance learning that's led by people that have either A, never led it, or B, led it in like a traditional distance learning academy. This is a whole different animal than it is for a kid who has signed up for a distance learning environment. Getting to Shonda's point about social and emotional needs, this is a whole different environment. So if somebody hasn't experienced what this is like, I am a little bit hesitant about their capacity to meaningfully help our teachers develop the skills and attributes we need to succeed in that kind of environment. And I'll put my hand down now.
Thank you, Patrick. Tanya, then I'm looking at my list here. I'm gonna go with Tanya and Chuck, Alan, and we'll just keep going. So I'm gonna try my best to get to everybody. Tanya?
Hi, I just want to challenge all of us as we brainstorm our process for filling in the gaps of students, whether it is during the summer or during the school year, that we are mindful of our parent partners. And I refer to them as parent partners because really they're the ones in the home executing our ideas as to what we're coming up with. I'm a parent as well. I have two children, a 4th grader and a 7th grader. And as I listen to this, I'm thinking of how will that affect me as a parent as well. So our parents, let's just make sure that they have a seat at the table so they understand what we're trying to execute for the students. I do think that the idea of a consistent platform with the instruction from a parent standpoint would be helpful because parents wouldn't have to learn so many systems. We could offer training for parents statewide. They can have resources on our state webpage just to help them understand the content so that they can better help their students. And when I'm saying understand the content, I'm not saying learn calculus. I'm just saying understand the delivery and where to go to get it, because that has been some of the confusion throughout the pandemic just across districts. So let's just be mindful as we create things and we implement things that we remember our parent partners.
Unmute. I don't think he heard you call him. Unmute your mic. There you go.
Oh, I'm next in line. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me circle back on a couple of things if I could for a moment. Both Patrick and LaToya made some excellent points related to students with disabilities. The fact of the specialty, for the lack of a better phrase, in that student population and how we have to be extra sensitive and careful how we address bringing that particular area up to a better position again. But I would also like to remind everybody that we still have Career Center students out there. Someone mentioned earlier high schools. We still have students that are taking or took Career Center classes over the last year that still require hands-on opportunities to get their credentials. Now, in the grand scheme of things, this is not the biggest picture for the summer, but it's still something we need to be mindful of because our business community is looking to education to provide them with a workforce, and that we need to be mindful of getting that particular gap addressed at the appropriate time. That's comment number one. Going back to the connectivity though, Molly mentioned earlier that the Accelerate South Carolina has been discussing this in the sessions that they've already started having. My question would be is who is the industry partner on Accelerate South Carolina that is directly connected to the communications industry? And the reason I ask that is because at some point in time, the subcommittee that you've established that is going to be responsible for building and student services needs to, I think, connect with that group as well as those within the State Department staff that has already initiated this conversation. Although connectivity down the dirt road to a rural home is not part of a building service, it is part of a student service. And so I would like to make sure that we have those connections made when it's appropriate. Also, getting back to, again, a comment that Patrick made, we also need to be mindful of the fact as we're building this model, we have what, roughly 80,000 kids across the state where mom and dad are working and they are left to their own initiative when it comes to their daily work with their teacher. Now, in the younger ages, we would certainly believe that a parent or a caregiver is there to assist with them. But to the point earlier about high school students being disconnected, we need to make sure that the children that were in charge of seeing that they get a quality education are engaged. And we've got to be mindful of those that are left for very legitimate reasons to their own devices because mom and dad are working and getting their work accomplished. I hope that makes sense, but I just want to make sure that those particular components are not left in our work to address summer. Thank you for your time.
Okay, I want to call on Alan, his hand's up, and then I'm going to ask Molly to update us sort of on what we've already got planned as far as flexibility with addressing some of these career and technology needs and special services needs. So, Alan?
Yeah, good morning. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yeah, thank you.
Good. I want to follow up first on something Chuck just said with the broadband issue. I get contacted all the time by cellular service providers, by vendors who would have to use that for GPS or other things. And I give them all the same answer. When I can stand in the parking lot at Carver's Bay High School and you can call me on my cell phone to deliver your pitch, I'll listen to it. And I'm still waiting for that to happen. So we've got some really big holes out there. My main point I wanted to get to, though, was in talking about summer programs, is looking at the latest possible start dates for those. And that's because of the safety protocols that have to be developed before we do that. We've got to get this right. We've got one shot at it. If we can't have a safe environment for the limited purpose of summer school, we're going to have a hard time getting parents to send their kids back to school when the regular school year starts. And so I think we're going to have to do some, not only the development of the protocols, but also some training education for the teachers as well as the staff. And this will give us an excellent opportunity to make sure we get it right. And also keeping in mind the fact that what we're doing right now with today's reality probably is not going to be the same as it will be in July. So while we'll definitely be planning for the worst, we're hoping for the best. But I think it's just going to take that extra bit of time to make sure we get it right.
agree, and I'm glad you kind of circle back around to really what this classroom is going to look like when we can implement it. And again, I think we've talked about it, putting it into July. Hopefully that will be helpful for one, the situation with COVID, and also with their ability, to not have a gap going into the fall. So, Molly, if you would just talk about the protocols, and then kind of where we are on CAPE certification and some of the other things we can do right now.
Alan, I think it's a great point to bring us back around. We've got to ensure that no matter what we do instructionally, if it's face-to-face, that parents and our instructors, our teachers, feel comfortable in coming into the school. So we've got to have a safe environment. I spoke yesterday with the staff at DHEC, and I anticipate in the next, possibly today or tomorrow, they are working currently on some recommendations of protocols that we need to consider. It's hard for them too, looking out, what is it going to look like in August, but we need to know from them, what are they going to recommend that teachers wear a mask, that students wear a mask? We don't know yet. We don't know yet what that will be, but I know there will be high needs for sanitation, a lot of school building cleaning. So that's an important piece. And then as far as the CTE certifications, I'll just remind you all that the governor's order on the last 2 weeks of school did give districts some flexibility there to begin some small group, individual type instruction or assessments. Now, again, the health protocols need to be in place, but if I had a question from a superintendent this week, we have a student who needs to do their performance task assessment on Megatronics. Well, yes, if the instructor agrees and the student agrees and they wear a mask and do the best they can, you can start bringing in folks to do those kind of performance tasks. And also, we particularly mentioned special education and the need for us to meet with parents, or there's some services that just cannot be done virtually, but we've got to do one-on-one with students. So those kinds of things are allowable with a great deal of caution. So maybe John Payne, if you would allow me, Chairman, ask Dr. Payne to speak, since he has the special education in his division. Okay, John?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So absolutely great points all around. And that's part of what Dr. Mathis and our directors have been having conversations about in terms of the last 2 weeks, and what kind of opportunities, again, keeping the safety, the health, and the welfare of our students, because oftentimes, our students with disability are a wide array of students, just like all of our students are, some of whom have underlying health conditions that make them particularly vulnerable to infection. And so we want to be critically attentive to making sure that what we do face-to-face is following all the guidelines and guidance from CDC and South Carolina DHEC. Saying that, looking at those opportunities the last 2 weeks, because we recognize and that there are just some special education related services needs that just are nearly impossible, if not impossible, to be done virtually. Certain evaluations for children, or psychoeducational evaluations, when you're trying to determine if they're eligible for special education, really need that face-to-face. Certain therapies may be. We've been working with our Department of Health and Human Services as they've looked at increasing flexibility for Medicaid billing. They recently released a statement to allow for occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech language to be reimbursable services. They put out a bulletin very recently. We shared that information with instructional leaders together. The other thing that my division is doing is working very much hand in glove with David's division, because the universe of struggling students for the summer learning opportunities, we recognize that some of those would have disabilities. And so working very closely with him, as well as working a similar framework for looking at some supplemental services, perhaps to begin in July and extend through the year. That could be some extended day services to provide some of those related services, those therapy, that specialized instruction to students to address the gap that all students have experienced, and certainly our students with disabilities. So we're working very closely with David's division as we kind of frame that out with a series of recommendations.
Thank you, John. Appreciate those comments. I'll kind of try to, it's 11:11, so I'll try to kind of bring us back just a little bit for a few minutes here. If anybody else, I think everybody's had an opportunity to comment, except Brian, do you have a comment?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Great. I was just talking to Dr. Kilraw through text message, and we can look at too is partnering with businesses and maybe even local churches in some of these communities that are rural, because I know they have some resources that we probably could tap into to help if students don't have equity and access. Maybe some of these local businesses or some even these churches may be able to make sure these kids are getting what they need in the summer programs. And also looking at the possibility of things in the fall coming, not being as normal as we expect them to, just looking at being South Carolina strong together, trying to make sure we're using the resources that are in businesses and churches and trying to figure out ways that we can continue to make sure all these kids are getting the access that everyone deserves.
I appreciate that. Let's see. Missy.
Hey, good morning. I'm just following along with some of the comments and just trying to make sure that, when we get the plan finalized a little bit more, that we get the funding in place. I think the one thing that stands out to me is when we talk about reimbursement, there are a lot of districts that don't have the capacity to spend first and receive the funds later. So I think we're going to need to be mindful of that. Every district's in a different situation. And as we step through and get further in the plans, I think we're going to have to look at how it's going to impact each district. So, just waiting for the funding mechanism.
Thank you. So why don't we talk a little bit about going into the fall, and then I know that Superintendent Spearman would like for us to maybe summarize what our thoughts could be as far as moving ahead with planning in our subcommittee groups on the summer in classroom program and virtual, and determining when we want to move forward with meeting and working on that. So we've talked a little bit about going into adding some days or adding instruction time after, making sure that we address. Everybody's raised a lot of good concerns about the ability of what our students have learned and how they can move forward, and how they will need to really just not start where we think they might be, that there's going to be some catching up to do. So I know Patrick had some very good comments about that, and I appreciate it. So why don't we talk a little bit more? If anybody has some comments, I know Latoya's laid out some very good comments. Anybody else have any about where we need to really have our subcommittee groups work on, our ideas on what the start of school would look like in the fall? Because we're trying to take good notes, and then we want to develop those in our subcommittees. I know Patrick's got his hand up. Yeah, Patrick.
Thanks. I think there's two things that when we talk about fall. A, we have to first prioritize the health and safety aspect, and I think the building and operations subcommittees would look at that most specifically. But as Superintendent Spearman mentioned, whether that means masks for everybody, whether that means temperature reading at the door, we've got to create environments where our students are safe, where parents feel safe sending them, and where our staff feels safe coming. Especially with this disease, I always am concerned for my students, but I'm even more concerned for my coworkers that may have underlying health conditions that may not be comfortable walking back into an environment that we have not been able to address all appropriate health situations. Related to that, the second thing I think we got to talk about for the fall is we got to talk about staffing. We've got to make sure that our schools are staffed up, because everything that we've talked about with learning management systems, and to Latoya's great point about having access to online curriculum and resources, None of that matters unless we have great teachers in place. And we've got to make sure that we have sufficient staffing to be able to manage appropriate numbers of students. We've talked about gaining time back, and that's good. But I put into the chat box, I would argue that a K-3 teacher with a group of 10 to 15 students in a normal school day is going to drive more student learning than a K-3 teacher with a group of 25 students could ever do in a 1-hour extended school day. So we've got to get creative. We're talking about a lot of needs with finance when it comes to learning management and broadband, and those are all important. But the fundamental thing we've got to worry about from funding is making sure that we can maintain our staffing levels at a bare minimum, and possibly even try to find ways to have more staff so that we can meet the needs of students in smaller learning environments.
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate that. Latoya?
I just wanted to add just a couple of things as we think about the fall. Definitely, we need to have some mental health support, social emotional support for students and for staff. I have to tell you, this is my 20th year in education, and I went to York One, and I'm working with a colleague who I started teaching with my very first year. And I turned to him one day as we were loading meals onto a bus and said, "Did you ever think we'd be working together during a pandemic?" So I just want to say that social emotional need, it should be for everybody. It should be for our students, but also for our staff, for our leaders who are trying to help keep all of us intact. And if we can have that support on site for students, that would be great. That would be great. That's an important part. The second part I want to say is that if we can have some instructional content, it's going to be critical. I know the department has plans for those learning progressions, Dr. Mathis, in language arts and math, K to 12. That's going to be a critical piece in us recovering learning. We know we cannot go back in terms of addressing every single standard and indicator by subject. But what we can do is figure out what are the essential processes and prerequisite skills kids need for the next sequence in their learning. And that will help us use time efficiently and effectively. And I think we need to look, or maybe even think about, in addition to that content, is a statewide common diagnostic tool of some sort. And that might look different in early childhood than elementary, than high school, but teachers having the ability to be diagnosticians and work toward focused learning targets is going to be key. We want to remove, I think, and Sherry put in the chat box something to the concern about teacher retention. Well, I think with the 4 points I've laid out, the learning management system, the instructional content, the professional development, and the focus on being a diagnostician as a teacher, I think that's the kind of support teachers want and need. And I want to just remind everybody that if we start the school year in August in a remote learning format, we need to remember that this is a little different because we had been with our students for 36 weeks before we started remote learning. There's a lot of relationships that have been built in a face-to-face way. This would be us starting new with students who we haven't spent time with. We haven't hugged in the morning or patted on the back, and it's going to require a different approach. I just wanted to share those things. Those are my final thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Latoya. I want to maybe try to get a consensus on a couple of points for Superintendent Spearman to consider here. I think we're all kind of agreeing that if the summer program should be in July, if we do an expanded summer program. Another major concern is, or one concern is the upfront cost. Making sure that the districts that may not be able to come up with that, there's a recommendation on how they can handle that. That we focus, as far as this program goes, on K-3 and give districts flexibility to work beyond that, as far as summer programs, and then of course making sure we have all of our safety protocols in place, that we are that we're meeting the needs of our special ed students, and what can we do maybe further in the summer on some of those things. So I want to come up with maybe 4 or 5 major points that I think we can have consensus on or agree on. And then the other thing I want us to talk about a little bit more into the fall is, do we address an extra days? Do we address K-8 or K-5? You know, a lot of that will be, you know, funding is a big issue with a lot of that. So I want to get your best thoughts maybe on those issues, and then see if we can determine a path forward after this meeting on what our next steps will be.
And one other point, I saw Dr. Moore reminded us that we do work very closely with the Department of Mental Health, and they are hoping to offer some summer mental health type activities for students too. Dr. Moore, do you want to, Madam Chair, is that all right to ask Dr. Moore just to comment on that possibility?
Good morning, and just briefly, yes, so mental health is having conversations with their local mental health directors. And so in a meeting day before yesterday, they are definitely wanting to come into the schools. So if their schools are opened in the summer, so I will propose to them that July seems to be the time frame that most of the camps, that they're going to be face to face. And so what they want to be able to do is to come into the schools, provide that mental health, those mental health services for students in a group environment, if that's even possible. But they're very excited and very intrigued. So after this meeting, I'm going to report back to them just to notice that the plan seems to be that if schools are offering mental health, summer camps, then maybe that's the time to contact. We'll determine if it's the principals or the superintendents. And they're also interested, just quickly, Molly, is to say, please allow students to carry their electronic devices home during the summer. They understand the bandwidth issues and things like that. But for those students who have a capacity in electronic devices, they would like to have that option of, you know, just telemental health services for students and families as well. So this is students and families in terms of the telehealth component.
Thank you. And just thank you for reminding me of that. And I would defer to the superintendents and district administrators and principals too on the call. Do you all see that as a problem too? I know you're collecting a lot of materials and equipment from students during those last 2 weeks, but we have had a request for, I guess, all students, but surely those who might have some activities that they need to participate in over the summer. Have you all thought about that, of allowing them, or do you already let some of them keep their computers or laptops with them during the summer? Harrison, do you all do that, or Greenville County? Charleston?
Molly, we're in discussions right now of trying to figure out with our lease agreements with the vendors, how we take those devices up, update them, clean them, repair them, get them back out to students if we use them this summer. Can I also interject a point here about the accountability system? And I know we've asked you this. Could you go back through possibly with the Council of Chief State School Officers and you guys make a request next year on possibly some testing waivers or accountability measures? That is just a tremendous pressure on teachers right now when they're facing the amount of time and learning that we've lost due to this. And I know this year when we got the waiver, we were able to focus on the learning. And I don't speak for the EOC. I'm a member of the EOC, but I would love to see a waiver for next year for that high stakes testing. Formative assessment is different, but those end of year high stakes tests just put a tremendous amount of pressure on our teachers.
Thank you, and I see a lot of heads nodding. I think the issue, you know, for the first 6 or 7 weeks of this pandemic, we've been in survival mode. Now we're in sort of looking to the future, getting prepared for what we're going to do this summer to try and start the recovery and and into the fall. But yes, for future, I'm beginning to hear folks think about that. So I thank you for bringing that up, and we'll continue to gather thoughts on that. But I do agree with you, as much focus as we can have on learning and getting it to happen, taking off any undue stress is the right way we should go.
I think that would be certainly something that we need to, this, our subcommittee needs to consider. We're starting.
Yeah, I'd like for you all, if you all, the subcommittee on instruction, if you would, and then, we need to talk with our counterparts at EOC, and we've got 2 members of the EOC on this committee, but also the staff, and work with them on what should the accountability system look like for the future. That's definitely an area we need some good discussion on.
I can comment on that for a moment with testing. I've seen lots of comments on social media and heard from several teachers that they appreciate the fact that the tests were waived, and that even though we're in a pandemic, it's given the opportunity to be extremely flexible with the curriculum that they're delivering to their students, and they're hopeful for the future that some of these assessments can be waived going forward. So I'm happy that you brought that up, because that's been a huge relief to teachers. I was a biology 1 EOC teacher, and I just can't imagine having to think about that, teaching and preparing students for that test this year or next year, while we're just trying to make sure that we access all of our students and make sure that they have a true learning experience while they're dealing with this pandemic. So thanks for bringing that up about testing, because teachers, we've really been talking about that, and just the possibility of reimagining how we assess our students. If we have that learning management system that Dr. Dixon talked about, how we can use those formative assessments and maybe consider stepping away from the mandated test that we require in South Carolina.
Molly, this is John, if I could make a comment. So as some of you probably know, we're currently, the department and the Education Oversight Committee, working with the National Center for Assessment, is currently reviewing our accountability system. We're required in state law to do it. And several of the folks on this committee actually serve on our accountability cyclical review. Brian, I think, Shonda's on that. State Superintendent Spearman is on that. So I think, in as much as we're dealing with, we have representation on this that's also providing that feedback. Our next meeting with that task force is next week on May the 5th. And so I think while we have certainly challenges with that we're going through a review of our system is fortuitous now, so that we can make some of these recommendations to the cyclical review team as we think about accountability for the future.
Okay, so we're looking at, I'm again going to try to summarize and look at where we want to move forward with our subcommittees. So I think Superintendent Spearman, what we're looking at is yes on expanding our summer school program. Dr. Mathis, did you mention kind of the numbers that you were looking at as far as the 3rd grade students that are, that score do not meet? So I know that you've got to have a sort of a ballpark budget figure, and in your proposal, Dr. Mathis, I believe you talked a little bit about the possibility of a number overall, and maybe we could at least have a benchmark to go by to determine some funding.
Sure. We looked at, historically, about 14,000 students score in does not meet on SC Ready and math each year. So, and that's been consistent. 3rd grade students each year score about 14,000 in does not meet. So with that, the ask, I think, is to adequately broaden the number that we could serve for the students that would need to come to a summer program. It's about 35 million that would cover the cost for an expanded program for what other beyond where we are. And I also want to comment that our proposal also that we were working on also puts in that extended day piece is critically important to provide extra support for students in the fall once we really know where they are with learning progressions, and providing interventions that are in addition to what they would normally get in the school day. So that helps.
Thank you. All right. So, so I think I can, maybe structure this, and y'all chime in, please, and help me with this. So, expanded summer reading math program in July. We will certainly have to look at, transportation, food service. We haven't really talked about food service in the summer. I would like to maybe mention that a little bit. And a lot of you made comments about transportation. And Alan, of course, you, like I said, you've been working on how we can, we have to do social distancing, what that means on transportation, and some of those other things that our buildings and operations committees are going to have to look at. And then K3, we can expand it to address K3, and then again, maybe how we can help with those that be able to manage some upfront costs.
And Dr. Mathis, I believe the 35 million does include transportation costs, right? $2,500 per student that we figured that on. It does provide for transportation in that amount, correct?
Right, it would. Mm-hmm.
So we have already built in that cost. So students would be transported, and as Dr. Coleman mentioned, meals served. And I will say, we've got all of our districts right now, as you know, participating in this meal program. The waivers that we have received thus far go through June 30th. After that, we would be operating. Hopefully we can get those additional waivers. We don't have that information yet from the U.S. Department of Education, but we have many school districts who are already planning to do their normal summer meal program. And then there are lots of nonprofits. You mentioned the faith community and other groups that help with serving meals during the summer. So all of that will still be up and going, just like it has in the past. We hope expanded, serving even more students, but that's on the planning stages, and will be up and running this summer. Okay. Yeah. So you just answered. Patrick asked that, yes. Does it include, based on social distancing requirements? So Patrick, you're right. And I think that is, we already know that we're going to have to use more buses. And I think I saw Chuck point out the square footage for a classroom is 800 square feet. You can put 24 children in a classroom with 800 square feet, but they're going to be standing in the corners, and it's not doable, right, Chuck? So I'm guessing, what would your recommendation? Have you thought about that, Chuck, as far as how many students could social distance properly in an 800 square foot classroom?
Well, understanding that 800 square feet is a basic standard. If it's a kindergarten, first grade class, the space is a little larger. But when you take into account the casework, the teacher's desk, just things that occupy square footage, that 800 square feet narrows down rather dramatically. Well, if social distancing remains at 6 feet, then that's 36 square foot per student per classroom. If you've got 800 square foot on average, there's some larger classes, there's probably some that are a smidge smaller, but using 800 square feet as your benchmark, you're not going to be able to fit all the students in a class at the same time using that 36 square foot per student dynamic. So I've heard a lot of people suggest, in our chat, we've also talked about scheduling. Some school districts I've heard have been talking about maybe an A-B schedule, where using elementary as an example, you could have students in Mrs. Jones' class come in on half the class on Monday and Wednesday, the other half on Tuesday and Thursday. If the child is at home, they can still access the class on their days at home via digital learning. And then Friday would be yet to be determined. Transportation in that regard would be a more consistent factor because the buses would run the same route every day. They would just have to pick up different students on every other day. Suggestion has already been made about a half-half schedule where Mrs. Jones' class comes in on half come in the morning, half come in the afternoon. That works in smaller districts because of transportation. In a larger district, your challenge is going to be the bus routes. Essentially, your buses are going to be on the road twice as long. So there's an additional cost associated with that, wear and tear on the transportation system and so forth. My request in part of the chat earlier was let's at least consider, as we're moving through this conversation, some flexible options for the districts to utilize if we have to go away from a standard back to school model in August. So a large district could do one option, a smaller or moderate sized district could use a different option. But at the end of the day, the students still have the basic same time with their teachers to get the quality instruction that they need. I hope that helps your question.
Thanks, Chuck. And I think that flexibility, because all school districts are different. So I think we need to have a flexibility recommendation both in our summer program and going into the fall.
This has really been helpful. I think as y'all move into your subcommittee groups, we'll be able to kind of nail down some real recommendations. But one thing that I would appreciate a group talking, and I guess it will be in the instruction group. I think Patrick's point earlier on, I'm worried about all of our children. I'm concerned about all, but what about these children that have not engaged with us, and how do we get them? And I know teachers have tried, but with that subcommittee group, I really would appreciate any creative recommendations that they might come up with about what do we do with the children that we've not had contact with. I know DSS is concerned about that. DMH, Department of Mental Health, is concerned about it, and certainly we are concerned too. So please spend a little bit of time talking about that, what we could do over the summer to try and contact those students and have some special time with them.
All right, we're taking good notes. I hope everybody has after your subcommittee assignment on some things we need to do. I failed. Akil, I did want to give you an opportunity to speak. It's good to have you on here. It's good to see you again.
Great to see you. Thank you, Kathy. Great to see you again, and all the members of the task force for what you're doing. When the governor put together the Accelerated SC task force, the mission was to come up with ways to revitalize and expand South Carolina's economy. And there are some realities that the business community has faced, that our municipalities are facing, our cities are facing. There's a cross section from the ports authorities to the restaurants, hotel tourism, education. So many I can go through it, but we've broken our task force down into 5 components or 5 subcommittees that are meeting. The first one is response. They're looking at workforce capacity issues, workforce reentry, just like we're talking about today. Regulatory issues that need to be addressed. And we have a huge issue in supply chain logistics. We heard from the Ports Authority that 39 ships carrying materials that would be coming into our ports have stopped. And so how do we address the supply chain that we need? I don't know if you've ordered anything, but sometimes there's backlogs on that. And so getting that going. The second one is protection. That DHEC is heading that. And they're looking at identifying protocols so that we can have guidance on returning to school. These are making sure that We were talking about how many students can be in a classroom. What are the safety issues that need to be addressed? Right now, half of the state's daycare centers are closed. And return to work means that those daycare centers, those summer programs, those camps and parks, they need that guidance on how to reopen. So the protection group is working on that. I appreciate Katie Nels is on here. She can also fill in gaps where I've messed up. She's been phenomenal representing the department in this task force. But the third one is governance, and that's the one that I'm serving on. That's headed by the Executive Office of the Governor. And we're looking at how this, in fact, impacts our first responders. There's going to be a lot of need. You have to think about the PPE that the police officers need, the fire department, the first responders, and all of those who are on the front line, the nurses. And so teachers in a blended or return to work situation, they'll be frontline workers. And so we're thinking about that in terms of economic revitalization. And we have to consider, and very interested on the operation and administration's task, because like Patrick said, you are thinking about your staff. And, if we look at the revenue that has been lost, a lot of this CARES Act money can't be used to recover lost revenue. And so there's a continuing resolution that we're excited about coming through, but making sure that we can keep our staff and keep the system intact is a huge piece. And that's across all public safety, Department of Education, higher education. So we're looking at that as well. And then resources. This is headed by the Department of the Executive Budget Office, and how that South Carolina set to receive $1.996 billion from the CARES Act, and how this money is going to be appropriated, what's the metrics of distribution, things of that nature. And the last one is information. That's going to be headed by the Department of Administration. And how do we get this information out? I think someone was saying that one-stop shop where, and I like, I think it was Ms. Addis or Latoya was talking about our parent partners. They are a huge piece of delivering a remote learning platform. Where do they go? Make it simple, make it easy for them to get our information. And like Brian was saying, any partners that we're going to bring in terms of our businesses, our churches, our religious community service organizations. But overall, I think the overall recommendation is economy comes back with trust. And any recommendations that we have has to build the public trust, that when our students return, that they're safe, that when our teachers return, that they're safe. And building the public trust in something that is easy to understand and to execute is step one. So I do appreciate having the ex officio status on or appointment to this committee to listen and to take back these recommendations. Our biggest lift is preparing for the worst case scenario and praying for the best. And without connectivity, you can't educate. And so we're looking at ways that how we as a state could make sure every household has access to some form of the broadband spectrum, whether it's wireless or fiber. But we have to make sure that there's connectivity for all of our students. I just want to give an overview of the Accelerate SC.
Thank you, Keel, and I think that certainly you're right. Connectivity and broadband are really, we've heard it from everybody here. So I think that's, one thing that's really gotta be high on the list that hopefully the state can address. So a couple of things. One, you asked, will committees have staff liaisons designated? Yes, they will. The other point I want to let you know is that, Superintendent Spivern does have, some advisory groups related to your committees that are folks that have said they want to help, but you can, you can include others in their respective fields. You please get input from your colleagues, and it doesn't just have to be you four. You're going to be the core group that we're used to make that recommendations, but there are some really the brain trust of our educational resources and our teachers and our administrators. It's amazing, and I think that we're here to get the best ideas, put together the best recommendations that we can. So feel free to to really brainstorm ideas and work towards those. At this point, we're on a time frame where I know with summer getting here quick, we need to really work hard in the next couple of weeks. So what I'd like to do is determine we can meet. We want to meet next week. I'd really like for our subcommittees. I plan to be a part of those as much as I can, but I would like to have our subcommittees start working immediately on these issues. I think if you've taken notes, if you've looked at the comments, we've addressed. I think we've laid out a skeleton of what we want each one of these subcommittees to look at, and we can make that formally in a document so that we sure each one addresses those issues we need to. And I think we need to look at probably our recommendations for summer first, and then certainly continue what else we can do besides the summer program in math and reading, and then go ahead and start working also on the start of school. So I'd like, if you have any other, I know we have a couple people that want to make a couple of comments. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you to keep them very short, but I want you to, to be able to, hope you've taken good notes on what we can do, and then we need to determine how we can move forward with getting these subcommittees made.
And said, do you have your date for, we're planning to meet again?
We are planning to meet again next Tuesday at 1 o'clock. Hopefully Tuesday and Thursday at 1 o'clock. So I hope the subcommittees, I hope you'll be able to meet for then. Bring us back some information. Yeah, what I would like, we're all colleagues, but, just so that we'll have some ability to summarize and keep up with what's going on in our committees, I'm going to ask Alan if he would chair the Building and Student Services Committee. I'm going to ask Scott Turner if he would chair the Operations Administration Subcommittee, and I'm going to ask Patrick if he would chair the Instruction Subcommittee. But again, that's just make sure you're moving forward. Y'all are all great colleagues and know how to work together well in a committee. So I'd appreciate if we would move forward on those as quick as you can. I'll get with staff, determine how we can get those committees together to meet.
Laurie Trawick's on the call. Laurie will help get the meeting time set up for you all, and the chairman of this subcommittee, and you need to, we'll set those up virtually or however you choose to meet. Laurie, you got something you need to say?
Yeah.
Thank you. I have an Excel spreadsheet that has all of the committee members, the task force members' email addresses, so I will send that to y'all. On tab 2 of that is all of the advisory group people that have volunteered, including SCDE staff that would be able to support you. So I will send that out to all of you after this meeting so that you'll have that, and it has everyone's email addresses.
So, you sent some suggestions on meeting times, some other things that are scheduled, so we'll look at it real hard into this and try to come up with a time that's best for everyone. And if there's a way for us to meet, you know, meet the requirements of social distancing and meet face to face, I'd love for us to be able to do that at some point.
And Kathy, if I may, I know Harrison and Shonda both are serving on the SREB task force. Are there any recommendations, having served on that group? I know they're just getting organized too. Are there any issues or suggestions that you might have from them that in a way that we organize or move forward? Or have they already come up with some recommendations? Harrison?
It's interesting that the conversation today has very much paralleled the conversation that we had last week on that first organizational meeting. And especially with the way the subcommittees are broken out, those actually ended up hitting the subcommittees that y'all have set up. Were actually hitting the most important areas that we had identified that needed to be addressed. So it's quite interesting that the two paralleled each other.
Right. So all good minds think alike, huh?
Yes, and some of the things that you all mentioned as far as health and safety concerns, those are some of the issues that are being addressed. And we have our meeting at 2 o'clock today, and we'll be going further into making recommendations. One of the cool things that I've found about being a part of this is they plan to have different recommendations for like rural versus urban schools and different scenarios for school districts throughout our state to be able to view and possibly model after those. So looking forward to sharing that information with everyone.
Sounds great. And Sherry has offered up that she's certainly keeping up with what's going on nationally. And if you have some good information to share with us, or like you said, if there's we know of a state that's doing something, we need to contact them. She's very willing to do that. I appreciate that. Alan, you have a comment?
Just quickly, the state school safety directors will be having an online meeting today at 2 o'clock too. So this was a great time to do this so we can share it with them and get their input.
That'd be great. You get some input on that.
And as Kathy mentioned, we had some other folks who volunteered to serve. I had to keep this group small, but we are certainly going to use many of them to be advisors. So we'll be giving you those names. And as Kathy also said, if there are other folks you feel like you need to contact, please do that. This has been very helpful. And thank you. We had over 800 people on this call today listening in. So it shows how interested folks are. And I know as of about an hour ago, we had already received over 1,000 comments. I don't know what the number is right now, but we will take all of that information and distribute it out to the appropriate subcommittee so that people across South Carolina do have a way to communicate directly with you. So thank you all for the public for participating.
We really appreciate that. We appreciate the input. So I want to be sure we will maybe put together your staff the issues under each one of these that we want you to work on in your subcommittee, get that to you this afternoon. Time-wise, do you think your subcommittees can meet tomorrow or Monday?
Prior to
as soon as
Tuesday
possible. If you can get some, right, we will, we need to go ahead and get this started. I would love to see you do that. If you want to, I guess we could work with you, have a chat between each one of our subcommittees, maybe get started on that and determine the time to meet. We'll try to work on that this afternoon. How about that? Does that sound good to everyone? Everyone comfortable with while there's a lot of ideas, I feel like the consensus is that we do need to work on some recommendations for expanding the summer program and how it would look. And also maybe adding days in in the fall and how that would look. There's lots of ideas about how that could look, and that we have flexibility, that we look at it, that, you know, the funding's gonna be an issue, but it sounds like that, you know, we've got at least a good handle on what it would cost, and you know, working with that, certainly doable, and how we can work with our small districts, our large districts, you know, maintain that flexibility. And then, as I think we started the meeting, what was so critical is that what those kids are learning, not just the time, but how we can really help our kids that are struggling the most is going to be key to what we can do this summer.
And I appreciate your comments. I feel better hearing from you, because it really justifies what we're thinking within the agency on how we should devote the funds that we're going to get. I really appreciate the comments about the learning management system, need for more technology, for professional development for our teachers on this new type of learning and new type of teaching, and the content, how we really, Dr. Mathis, I know he already has his group working on the foundational standards, but also some content. So we need to put more effort on that so that we can support teachers, so that they're not all duplicating the same effort, and really be focused on that and spread that out through our learning management system. So that's been very helpful. So I think we're on the right track for sure. But I appreciate you all taking this time to help us make sure that we are going on the best track and spending the money in the most useful and efficient way. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Superintendent Spearman, and thank all of y'all. I think we had a good discussion. And we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I know you're up to the task, and I really appreciate your willingness to serve also on this. So we will work on next steps on scheduling this afternoon, and hopefully get some information out to you. Does that work for everyone? And we'll get everybody's contact information out to everyone, and I'll work with Lori on contacting you as subcommittees and setting up those meetings. Good, everybody? Any other comments? We have 1 minute. Thank all of you so much.